We on today? We are in Exodus chapter 12, and I think one of the things that we will see here is the long journey beginning to now take a move in the direction that we were looking to go. So what do you relate to that? You're doing. You're action. You don't see no change. You're just continuously going through a task. It could be whatever it is. Trying to learn something, trying to get well, or trying to get an education, or trying to get your health. And you begin to start activities, and you're doing it, and you know you're doing the right thing, but initially you really don't see any change, and you're wondering, okay, is it really happening? Is it worth it? Well, at some point you wake up and you go, wow, I see the change. I see it happening. I see the difference. I see the improvement. I see the growth. I see the steps in the right way. And that's what we're going to look at today in chapter 12. We're going to see the actual situation where this nation that has been held captives for quite a while, is now at a point where they're walking out. But how did they get to that? Well, we know that story. We know how all that happened. And all right, we got Wayne here. Mm-hmm. All right, good to have you, Wayne.
Good morning.
All right.
And so I got out of therapy. I came home. I took my medication. I laid down. I forgot to set my alarm. I didn't wake up until 10 o'clock.
That's all right. We got you now, though.
Okay.
All right. So we are in Exodus chapter 12, and we're going to look at this movement. We got Taylor at the table as well here today. And so let's take a listen to our reading. This chapter is a little long, and so we want to try to get it all in, and we'll see how successful we are at doing that. But let's take a listen. Exodus chapter 12.
Chapter 12. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your account for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. The whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. They shall take of the blood, and strike it on the two side posts, and on the upper doorpost of the houses wherein they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs, and with the purtenance thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. And that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. And thus shall ye eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. The blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. And in the first day there shall be an holy convocation, and in the 7th day there shall be an holy convocation to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat. That only may be done of you. And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, For in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. In the first month, of the 14th day of the month at even, ye shall eat unleavened bread, until the 21st day of the month at even. 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses. For whosoever eateth that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. Ye shall eat nothing leavened. In all your habitations shall ye eat unleavened bread. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel, and said unto them,
Draw out, and take you a lamb according to your families, and kill the Passover. And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out the door of his house till the morning. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the 2 side posts, the Lord will pass over the door, and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. And ye shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee, and to thy sons forever. And it shall come to pass, when ye be come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he hath promised, that ye shall keep this service. And it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, What mean ye by this service? That ye shall say, It is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses.
And the people bowed the head and worshipped. And the children of Israel went away, and did as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne, unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said,
Rise up, and get ye forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as ye have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also.
And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people, that they might send them out of the land in haste. For they said, We be all dead men. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men, beside children. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt, and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass, that all the host of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, This is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof, but every man's servant that is bought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then shall he eat thereof. A foreigner and an hired servant shall not eat thereof. In one house shall it be eaten. Thou shalt not carry forth aught of the flesh abroad out of the house, neither shall ye break a bone thereof. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near, and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. Thus did all the children of Israel, as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass the selfsame day that the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies.
All right. So there we go with chapter 12. Now, when we look at this, what we notice is that we're at that point now where we're making the change. The change is actually happening. We put the work in, we put forth all the effort, and now the change is starting. All right, so what changes this? Well, what have they been trying to do? What did the Lord tell Moses way back in the beginning? I'm going to move you out of this land. You're coming out of Egypt. And sometimes that seems almost impossible when God tells you that you're living in a place and in a situation and in a circumstance that I'm going to bring you out of. And you look at it and you go, I don't see that happening, really. I don't see that becoming a reality because of the lack of vision and the lack, a lot of times, of just trust and confidence that God can make that happen. In this case, we see the struggle. It didn't happen just like bam. It was effort. Time and time and time and time again. Struggle, heartache, difficulties. And we could go through all of the different plagues that happened in that land in order for people to get aware and woke to the point where they say, wow, this is really what God said. And now I see that it's needed and it's actually going to happen. So what we see here is when we start this and looking at the first verse and following the progression of this, we see that it says, and the Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt. So he's still talking to them where? They're still where? In Egypt.
Yes.
So God is talking to them. He's dealing with them, telling them that this is absolutely going to happen. But remember, while this is still happening and while the development, you're still in Egypt. You're still in your issue. You're still in your problem. You're still in your difficulty. You're still in your struggle. You're still in Egypt. So God talks to him in the place of the struggle. You see, the thing we have to keep in mind, the scripture says that while we were what? Yet sinners, what happened? God loved us. And that's the point that we often forget and we overlook. That God loves us as we are. And we forget that sometimes. Or a lot of times we're trying to get to a certain place first. And in reality, all we got to do is just accept the love of God. And you say, well, let me, get my little mind together. Let me get all hooked up and let me get squared away first. No. Right there in Egypt, God loves you. He goes on, verse 2. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months, and it shall be the first month of the year to you. Now, what he's doing with this nation is he's saying this action that I'm about to do with you is going to be so monumental that we're going to make this the beginning of your year. So their whole calendar is changing. Their way of life, the way they mark time, the way they go about and count their days and their years are all going to adjust to this wonderful new thing that God is going to do, and it's happening now. All the other stuff that led up to this, still the change didn't happen. And while we're talking about it, yet here, God's talking to Moses. He recognizes, I can see the light now. I see where I need to be, and I know how to walk and where to go. But yet, presently, he's still in Egypt. But it's starting to open up. It's starting to become aware. It's starting to make sense. Because see, a lot of times beforehand, stuff is going on, and you kind of hearing what God said, but it's not really making sense. I don't see how that's going to happen. I don't get the vibe, but now I see it. All right. So look at verse 3, and it says, speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, that in the 10th day of this month ye shall take unto them every man a lamb, according to the house of their father, a lamb for a house. All right. So he's letting them know that this month, I want you to mark this as the beginning of the day. Now, on the 10th day of this month, this new beginning that I have for you, 10 days from now, I want you to go out and select a lamb. And when you read that, what comes to mind? I'm sure it does. Wow. Behold, the what? The Lamb of God. That was when John the Baptist was baptizing. He looked up and he saw Jesus coming. And he said, behold, here comes the what? Lamb of God. I also think about Revelation, when John was caught up, and they said the windows of heaven were open, and he was caught up, and he began to see what was happening before the revelation started, and they handed him a scroll, and he wept because no one was worthy to open the scroll. But then the cherubim told him, don't weep, because he says the Lion of the tribe of Judah, of the lineage, from the lineage of David, has prevailed and is worthy. So then when he looked, remember the cherubim said the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the tribe of David. But when John looked, he saw a what? A lamb. But it just didn't say a lamb, but a lamb as though it had been what? Slaughtered.
Slain.
A lamb that has been slain. So that's what he saw. So when we see this lamb here, we can see that this is the beginning, the representation that we have of the scriptures letting us know that there is going to be a payment for sin, and that payment is going to come from the lamb. All right. Well, who is the lamb? Well, we know that lamb is God. He's coming himself, and he's going to lay down his life. And we're going to see a description here of what it actually entails in a means in which we can comprehend it, but it's by no means the tell-all, be-all as to what happened in the eternal dimensional realm that God lives in, the suffering that he went through. We can relate to it by thinking of slaying a lamb. And then the lamb is able to nourish and to feed and to give, different needs that we need, from nourishment to clothes, heat, variety of different things. Well, God is our lamb that provides everything. He nourishes not just the body, but he nourishes the soul. All right. So we see the lamb has been told to us. All right. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Look at verse 4. And if the household is too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make you count of the lamb. So make a count of the lamb. So that basically means that the lamb is specific and has to be utilized by what? Everybody. So I can't eat lamb and my wife be full. And that's obvious. You can't eat good food and your children be healthy. Everybody's got to do what?
Take it for themselves.
They got to eat for themselves. And so that speaks to that as well. Each individual has to partake in this festivities of this, which is going to be one of the feasts of Israel. We're going to see that. But we're actually going to see two feasts introduced here. We'll get to the second one in just a bit. But we see the Passover is being described here. All right. And so in verse 5, it says, your lamb shall be without blemish. Oh boy. What does that mean? That means that whoever's going to represent that image of Jesus that represents the taking away of sin for the world, that particular representative cannot have any blemish. In other words, he has to be what? Sinless, spotless, but yet still be able to be put to death. And the struggle with that is we often represent the reason for why someone dies as, well, the wages of sin is what? Death.
Death.
But we're going to get a lamb that is spotless, that has no sin, and yet it's going to be what? Put to death. So that means it's a sacrifice. It's an offering. It's a payment willingly paid. And that was what God did for us. All right. So he says, it has no blemish, a male of the first year, ye shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. All right. So whether you got sheep or goats, you take one of those. Verse 6, and ye shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. So now, you're going to get them on the 10th, but on that 14th day of the month, that's when you're going to get that lamb that you've chosen on the 10th, that was blameless and had no blemish. And on the 14th day, you're going to go get them. All right? And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. Shall kill it. The whole assembly shall what? Kill it. Why did Jesus have to die? Because of the what? The whole assembly.
Yes.
For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever what? Believeth in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. So the keeping in mind here is that whole assembly. Everybody's responsible. Jesus died for me. He died for you. He died for everybody. All right? So that entire congregation shall kill it. We're all responsible. Some people, like from a historical standpoint, they like to say, well, it was the Romans government and the Jewish theology that did this. And from a historical aspect, that's true. But remember, no one actually killed the Lord. He did what? He gave his life freely. Exactly. So this was an offering. This was a giving. This was God. All right. And it's interesting that what's going to die here during this Passover? Every one of the what? Firstborn.
Yes.
But then what died to free all of us? God's firstborn, so to speak. Jesus wasn't born, but I'm just trying to draw the analogy. But the only begotten of the Father, Jesus Christ. He's the one that died. But now we're about to see a picture of that, but in the aspect of it being, if you don't accept Jesus, then the death that Jesus did becomes the requirement for you because you don't accept it. All right, so and that's the sad thing, that many people will not accept the free gift that God has given and say, I'll pay for it myself, which is really ludicrous, and it doesn't make sense. Why should you pay for a circumstance that's already been paid for you and lose out on all the benefits, lose out on all the growth, lose out on all the ability to truly get to know God, so God can then show you why he made you, which is such an important aspect of what our life and our eternity. And people have to, we forget. Everybody's thinking about, well, just life here, this and this here. You look at George Floyd, he's gone. But, if he knows the Lord, he ain't gone. He's better off than me or you. Right? Paul was caught between the two. He says, I have a desire to be here, which is needful, and a desire to be with the Lord, which he said is what? Far better. So Paul recognized that being with the Lord is a better situation than here. But now it takes confidence and faith, and you got to believe this. If you don't believe this, then it don't make sense to you. You're like, no, I don't see where you could say that me being with the Lord is better. Well, in His own time and in His own way, the Lord will bring you to that experience. All right, but you can't pick it. You can't choose it. You got to what? Walk the walk that He's what? Delivered to you. Some people try to, that those cults, they believe God when He says that the next life is a better place, but they don't believe God when He says, I will be with you while you're here. And then that Hail Bop cult, I don't know if y'all remember that many years ago, they went out and they committed suicide so that they could go, well, I want to go be with the Lord. Well, but what they did was they totally denied the reality that God says, no, I'm with you now. So you have to believe that He's with you now. He was with Moses and the children of Israel while they're still where? In Egypt. But your day of coming out will come. It will happen, and it's far better. It's far better. And that's an important aspect to keep in mind. All right. So, where were we at there? Number 7? Number 7, verse 7. And they shall take off the blood. They shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side panel posts and on the upper doorposts of the house wherein they shall eat it. Okay. So once you slain the animal, you're going to then take the blood. And I like the way the word that the King James uses here. Take the blood and strike it. So it's kind of, you take the blood, you dip it with these branches of hyssop, and you strike it onto the post and across the top part of the door. And what all that reminds me of is the striking that happened that drew the blood from who? Jesus. From Jesus. He was whipped. And when He was whipped, His blood that's when His blood initially began to what? To spill.
He was bruised for our iniquity.
He was bruised for our iniquity and chastised for our... I'm losing it there. But you know what? You look it up yourself. You'll figure it out. All right. But yes. And so, but it's important to recognize that by His stripes, the Scripture says we are what? Healed. All right. And so He suffered that whipping, that bruising, and yet that's part of the scenario around the Lamb. Okay, the striking of the blood. And when He got striped on His back, the blood showed. All right, so verse 8. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roasted with fire and unleavened bread, with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Okay, another thing to point out. All right, so we're going to do what? Eat the flesh. What did Jesus say at the Last Supper when He took the bread and He broke it? He said what? This is my what? Body. My body, my flesh. Body. All right. So He said, take and
unless
eat.
You eat it and drink it, you have no part.
You have no part of me. Exactly. All right. So we see now the eating of the flesh and the striking or the showing of the blood at the entrance to the door. Okay? And that's an important aspect as well. We're going to move through this, and we're going to be coming back to that in just a bit. All right, verse 9. It says, eat none of it raw, nor sodden at all with water. So that means don't eat it raw, uncooked, and don't eat it sodden or boiled in water. So you don't just eat it as soon as you kill it, and don't try boiling it. Well, then what do? He says, but roast with fire. Now, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, because we're going to talk about that roasting with fire. His head and his legs, and with
Pertinent.
and with the pertinent thereof. So that basically, all of the inside pieces. All right. So in other words, you roast what? All of it. Okay. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. So number one, eat everything, and the things that you can't eat, that you're not used to eating, like such as a lot of the internal organs and a part of the different parts of the eyes or the head that you just don't want to eat, whatever's left, you can't leave it. You have to do what? Burn it. And that once again represents the total reality that whole animal died. That whole animal was changed. That whole animal was transformed. And that's what happens to us by the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And that's what happened to Jesus. Jesus was what? He was transformed. He now has on his what? His glorified body. All right. And we're going to get back to that roasting in just a bit. Look at verse 11. And it says, and thus shall you eat it with your loins girded. So he says, you're going to eat it with your loins girded. Now, what does that mean? You're eating it ready to go. Oftentimes, there's a couple reasons why you want to gird your loins. Because you're getting ready to run, or to work, or to fight. And right now, I'm doing all of those. Okay? And your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. So you got one hand with your fork, and your other hand you got your staff. Because you're what? I'm ready to get out of here. It's time to leave. I'm prepared. And so we should say that about ourselves. Are you eating the lamb, but are you clothed properly? Do you have your shoes on? Do you have your loins girded? Put on the what? The whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. And a lot of times we can't stand because we're not prepared. We're not clothed properly. And so a lot of different things hits us, and Satan looks for that. He looks for people whose mind and spirit and soul are not clothed and wrapped in the things of God, so he can just throw things in their heart and in their mind. I'm just going to put that in you, put this in you, and it's hard sometimes to separate that from yourself to the point where it almost becomes part of you, and you need deliverance. That's where you get a whole lot. Where a lot of times when Jesus was on the earth, and you saw how many different people brought their loved ones to Jesus and said that this person was possessed by a spirit and possessed by an evil spirit. And it says, and I can't cast him out. And Jesus would say, well, how long have they been like this? And they would give him the story, and he would cast the demons out. Some of them he would just say a couple of words. Some of them he would have a little conversation. But the realities of it is, you got to have yourself girded with this, and that's for your own protection. It's for your own good. It allows you to not have to fight every battle, because you can deflect. People can get shot and can go to the hospital and get surgery and get the bullet out. But wouldn't it have been better if you had something that could have deflected the bullet? You still got shot at, but I was able to deflect it. And that's the thing about Satan. He's shooting at everybody, but is he hitting you? All right? Is his thoughts and ideas and ways and concepts getting into you? Is he hitting the target? Because if he's hitting the target, then now you got to go get something else now. Now it's time for a spiritual surgery, because you've been hit. All right? And if you don't get it, oftentimes what happens? You die. And that's not what we want. We want to be able to live for the Lord so we can live with the Lord. All right? And he says, eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. And that's where we get that whole aspect of the Passover. He's going to pass over us. This is the Lord's Passover. And this is where, even with Jesus, when he had the Passover supper, we call it the Last Supper, but it was a Passover supper he had with his disciples. Verse 12. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt. Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. All right. Look at what he says here. He says, he says, for I will pass through. So we often talk about the death angel and everything. And somebody says, well, who is this? Well, what did God say here? And he says, for I. Speaking of who? God.
Himself.
I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn as a mean sign, an emoji, so to speak, a icon of what I'm going to do to save everybody. I want to show you this whole Passover thing. There's going to be a death. Here, those that don't want, and the thing about God is he's not locked into our time. So he knows who needs to pay, who has to pay for their own death. See, for us, we only can see it literally, in order. Selena, help me out, girl. We only can see it in order. And so, but there is a ability of God that he's not locked in our time line. He can come in our time in many different areas and be there for thousands of years in one spot in our mind. And you go, well, how could that be? That's because God's coming at a different time and can feed us and give us so much in an instant. A lot of times we call that revelation. But he knows that these individuals are not accepting it. So they're dying. He's allowing their firstborn to die as a foreshadow of what he's going to do, because he knows they will not and have not accepted his offer. And I have to leave it there because I can't explain it any better than that.
It's like the Matrix.
It's like the Matrix, yeah. That's true. It has, God is just above and beyond what we are. He has a different reality. All right, so, and he says, I'm going to go through the land of Egypt. Well, I'm going through your problem. Egypt represents the problem that the Israelites were in. Egypt is this type of what? Sin. He says, I'm going to go through Egypt this night, and I will smite all the firstborn in Egypt, both of beasts and against all the gods of Egypt. So what he's also doing is all the strengths, and we saw that through all of the plagues, that the Egyptians lean on. Their cultural things that made Egypt who it was, so to speak. So they thought. They often forgot that one of the things that made them who they were was God, this God here, the God of Joseph, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, during the famine. And they overlooked that. And just thinking, well, we did it on our own, and was giving credits to their own Egyptian gods. It's like America overlooks the fact that, well, we built America and made America great, and it was just us doing it, and overlooking the contributions and the sacrifice that groups made, like the Native Americans and the slaves that were brought here from Africa, and we overlooked that. Well, there's an awakening taking place now, and we don't know to what degree that's going to last or how much change will truly happen down the road. But we thank God for some awakening at any point anyway. But what God is doing here is letting them know, I'm going through here. I'm going to do this. And those that are awake, we're going to see that in a minute, will have an opportunity to go with me. All right. Let's, I don't know if I'm going to rush. I'm probably not going to get through all this, so I'm just going to take my time. We're going to probably have to do a part 2. Because we only got about 15 minutes or so. All right, but let me just go through this here. I'm going to take my time. All right, and it says, verse 13. It says, and the blood shall be to you for a token unto the house where you are. It says, when I see the blood, I will what? Pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. All right. And I think it's again. I want to look at the word that he uses. He says, "When I see the blood." Keep in mind who's doing this. This is God. All right, and it says he said the blood that he sees is like a token. You know, and oftentimes when we think of tokens, it represents something. There's so much you can do with a token. There's so much you can achieve when you have a token. A dollar bill is a token. It represents something. When you have a credit card that has a certain amount of money on it, it's a token that represents something, and you can go down and you can pay a bill or buy a car or do a variety of things when you have that particular token on you, because it has authority behind it, and that's what this token represents here. This is a representation of your ability to not suffer penalty. I don't have to suffer the penalty because I have the token of the blood, and it's a memorial. All right. Where was I here? And it says, and when I see the blood, I will do what? I will pass over you. I will see. And that's the beauty, and that blood represents, once again, the righteousness of Christ. Because when the Lord comes through Egypt, he's coming to destroy everything that's not covered in his blood. In other words, Jesus' blood represents our righteousness. The scripture says the life of the body is in the what? In the blood. So when you look at your life, you then look at your blood. And your blood is tainted. And somebody says, well, I'm I have A blood or B positive blood or whatever. Well, that ain't what God's looking at. He's looking at the story that's in your blood. See, so the life of the body, the life of you in your body is in your blood. And God's reading that. And so he reads every action, every desire, every motivation, all that's in there. Well, if God is reading your life, but it just happens to be covered in Jesus' blood, so now the life of your body is now the blood of who? Jesus. So when he reads it, what does he see? What is he reading? Perfection. All right? He sees perfection. He sees absolute, well, this person is just like my son. And so then I will now pass over you. So as long as you have the blood of Christ applied to you, you will never suffer the wrath of God. But if you don't have the blood of Christ applied to you, the wrath of God is on you, will be on you, and will continue to be. It will be in eternal. We talked about the roasting it with fire. The scripture tells us that Jesus, when he died, he went down and he led captivity captive. So all those that were held captive in the lower parts, which we call in paradise or Abraham's bosom. But right across from that, we know from the story of the rich man, he said he was what? Tormented and flamed. And so when I hear the word roasted, I'm often thinking about that. I don't know how you roast an eternal soul or spirit. But all I do know is when he gave a description of that, he was like, how come Lazarus is over there in comfort and I'm being tormented in this flame? He described it as flame. I don't know if it's the same kind of fire that we have when we light a match. I can't explain that to you. I don't know what it is. But all I can say is he described it as being like flame. And that's not where I want to be.
Amen.
I want the token to get past that. I want my life that I personally messed up, but I'm accepting the covering, the blood of Jesus to cover me. I want Jesus to read my story, to read my life, and go, oh, he's perfect, just like my son. And when he's reading the lives of these Egyptians, that's not what he sees. So therefore, they're suffering the consequence. All right. 14. Is that where I'm at? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yes. It says, and this day shall be unto you for a memorial. In other words, he's saying, this is so important, this Passover, that I want you to mark it down and recognize it each year that it comes about. I want it to be something that you don't just say, okay, well, that was good. I'm glad that happened. No, be thankful and look at it and recognize what God did. So what he's basically saying, I want you to build a memorial or an altar or a means of being able to look at something and reflect what God has done for you, what God has done in you, what God has done through you. See, you don't build a memorial because you were able to walk down the street 1 block and come back home. That's not an achievement. You build a memorial because you had to go through something difficult. You had to come through something hard. You had to go through something that was significant, that in this case kills most people. Most people do not survive this, but you survived it. That's why God's saying, build a memorial. Because if you let me, I will get you through this. But man, you're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to let me do it for you. If you try to do it like these Egyptians do it, and you go grab on all their little gods that they thought, well, I'm gonna try this, and I'm going to try that, and I heard about this, and I thought about this, and you're going to keep trying all these other little gods. You know, we talked about all the variety of gods that they had, that they looked to for, well, let me try to find some focus or some meaning or some, and they're looking at the Nile River and the frogs and the lice and worshiping flies and say, well, we're going to worship the cattle. You know, there's people today, you know, in certain religions, they won't eat any beef because they worship the cow. All right, just like the Egyptians did, and then we're gonna, we're gonna worship our skin and our development, and then then what happens when it gets boils, and then, weather. We're gonna work, all the weather and all the different things and the climate and all that. We're gonna worship that. Well, then here comes the hail. Or we're going to worship our crops and the development of this and our food. Well, the locusts are coming. Well, I'm going to worship the sun. Well, here comes darkness. We need to what? Worship God. Therein is what you're looking for. Whatever it is that the Egyptians were trying to find in all this stuff here. What did God say in that 12th verse? He said, I am the Lord. So what he's basically saying, I am what you're looking for. You think you don't know, but I'm telling you, I know what you need, and I am what you are looking for. And so he goes on. He says, he says, make a memorial out of this. So it's a big deal. It means something. And ye shall keep it as a feast unto the Lord throughout all your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. So you're going to do this. You're going to remember what I brought you through, because what I'm bringing you through is significant. All right, verse 15, and it says, 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread, even the leaven out of your house. So he says, you're going to. Let me read that again. 7 days you're going to eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away unleavened bread out of your house. All right. So you're going to do a task. And basically what he's saying is, for 7 days from this point, going forward, when you do this memorial, you're going to have 7 days that you're going to eat unleavened bread. So that means bread that you don't put what in it? You don't put any yeast in it. You don't allow it to swell up. All right, you're going to allow it to be, it's like the matzah bread, very flat. Jesus talked about this. He said, and this is why we know that the scripture consistently relates leaven to sin. He said, and it's a different kind of sin. It's a sin that's tricky. It's like a devilish kind of sin, because he said, beware of the leaven of the what? Of the Pharisees. Why? Because the Pharisees had a religious outlook. The Pharisees looked godly, but inwardly they were what? Ravening wolves. And they were just evil in their actions. So he says, for 7 days you're going to have unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your house. So when you start this, you're going to put away all leaven. You're going to go through your house, You're going to look for the leaven, and you're going to remove it from the house. And this is the other. I said there was a second festival that they were going to be shown here. This is the festival of unleavened bread. So now we have introduced to us the festival of Passover, and now we see the beginnings of the festival of the unleavened bread. All right. Also in here, which is not going to be really described yet, is the festival of first fruits. Because that morning when they wake up and they're ready to go, that's the first fruits. But it's not going to be described here. We'll see that in Leviticus when it breaks it down a little further. But it is part of this whole triad of festivals that all are connected together. All right. So he says you're going to get all that leaven out of the house. It says, for whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day unto the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. So if you ignore it, why do I got to do that? I don't see what that makes a big deal. You see, trying to understand rather than trust, trying to figure the math out rather than just having faith, is going to kill a lot of people. A lot of people are just going to be like, because they're trying to find the formula that God uses. God doesn't use a formula. He's God. And so when he says, get the leaven and take it out, and don't eat any leaven. And if you do eat any leaven, well, wait a minute. I mean, you going to tell me that just me eating some leaven, I now have to be thrown away out of the congregation of Israel? Yes. That's what God said. I didn't say it. He said it. Well, we eat leaven before, but I mean, when the other days, when we're not doing this festival, I get to eat leaven. You sure do. But he says, under this particular time here, don't eat it. And if you do eat it, you lost your rights to be considered an Israelite.
That's a rebellion.
Exactly, because what you're doing is you're not trusting in what he says. You don't have that confidence in God. You're trying to figure it out yourself. There is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of what? Death. And we have to learn to stop trying to figure. Let me tell you something. I've been down that road. I've been there where I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get this thing and I'm going to make it make a whole lot of sense. And what I realize is I can't make it make sense. What I recognize is the most clarity that I've gotten is I got to trust God and have faith in Jesus. That's it.
Without faith, it's impossible.
It's impossible. Exactly. So therein is the bottom line that I got. If you want to do the works of Jesus, do the works of God, believe on him who he has sent. Am I going to believe God? Am I going to trust God? All right? Or am I going to try to figure it out myself? Because I have good insight. I'm kind of clever. I'm witty. I can think outside the box. I can figure this out. No, I need to get the leaven out the house during these particular times and don't eat any for 7 days. Now, how difficult is it? A lot of times people don't want to do it because it ain't difficult. We'll see that when we get to the story of Nabal. When Elisha tells him, well, if you want to get rid of your leprosy, just go down to the Jordan River and dip 7 times. And he goes, what does that prove? And his servant says, and he says, I'm not going to go. And his servant said, listen, man, if he had told you to do something difficult that you could do, you would have broken your neck trying to do it. So why not go do something he's telling you is something as simple as just go down to the Jordan River and dip 7 times and just do what he says and see what happens. What do you got to lose? Well, fortunately, he listens to his servant. He goes down there, he dips 7 times, the leprosy's gone. You see, it's not a figuring out, and it's not a formula. It's believe God and then walk in it. And then you'll say, wow, look, change has happened. Why? Because you just trust God. God can produce the change. Is there anything too hard for God?
No.
Okay. So, therefore, get rid of the leaven, do it for the 7 days, and watch God bless. All right, we're going to get just a couple more verses in here. Verse 16. And the first day there shall be a holy convocation. And in the 7th day there shall be a holy convocation. All right, so he's saying now, during the seventh day, period, there's something special about the first day, and there's something special about the seventh day. And I want it to be in you a holy what? Convocation. Let's figure out what that is. To you, no manner of work shall be done in them. So, what is one of the special requirements of that first and that seventh day? You are to do what? No work. I gotta, take care of this and have businesses to do, and this. God says don't do no work. Now we're going to see this whole aspect of no work is going to be one of the biggest problems and one of the main reasons why this wonderful people that's coming out of Egypt is going to go back into slavery again. This is why they're going to get, one of the main reasons why they're going back under the Babylonian Empire. They're coming out of Egypt, but the devil's got a lot of masks. And we're going to see the mask of Assyrian, we're going to see the mask of the Babylonians, plus a whole lot of other little ones that are going to come around, like the Philistine and the Palestine, all the different ites, the Hittites, and different ones we're going to see. Jebusites, yes, Jebusites. That's the one David's going to have to deal with. All right, so he says, eat and do no manner of work shall be done in them, save which every man must eat. So the only kind of work that you might be able to do is the work that's required for you to eat. So you got to get your fire and move some pots and pans. That's the only kind of work that's acceptable. Any other kind of work, you're breaking what God says. Now, what we're going to recognize when we start going through is that this is the beginning of all these do this, don't do this, do this, don't do that. We're going to start seeing a whole lot of that. And what's going to end up happening is we're going to be like, wow, as it starts adding up, it's going to end up to be about 613 do this and don't do that. And what I begin to recognize, I thank God for Jesus that said, well, that when he died, he was able to have all of the works and all of the law nailed to the cross with him. So now all I got to do is what? Trust Jesus. All I need is his blood covering me. And then I walk accordingly. I walk to that which I am described as. And I'm described as the Son of God. So then I need to look in Scripture and say, well, how does the Son of God supposed to walk? And then I walk that way. All right? And that's the beauty. And some, it's like children. Some children walk early, some children walk late. But you need to start what? Walking. All right? And move on down. All right? So he says, no matter work should be done except that which you eat. And that is the only work supposed to be done. Let's finish up on verse 17 here. And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. We talked about that's the feast that's been added, introduced to us along with the feast of Passover. For in this self same day have I brought the army out of the land of Egypt. What did he call Israel? He called them a what? An army. So if an army comes to do what? To fight a battle. You're fighting a war. What are we doing? We forget that. We forget, well, why does we struggle? Why do we have issues? We're in a war. In war, you have casualties. You get people wounded. And the person that you're warring against is trying to confuse you, trick you, mislead you, kill you, destroy you.
Make you get complacent.
All that, complacent. Anything he can do to gain a what? Advantage.
That's right.
All right? And in war, the thing you keep in mind is the devil, he don't play fair. See,
Amen.
That's right.
if he can get anybody, when he had, you look at Jesus with his disciple Peter. Who was more in love with Jesus than Peter? But you saw the devil get in Peter, trying to get to who? Trying to get to Jesus.
Amen.
And Jesus called it out. Because Jesus was like, I'm going to have to go and die, and I'm going to have to go and suffer, and then I'm going to rise again. And Peter was like, you ain't never going to die. I'm not going to let anybody hurt you. If I got to give my own life, I'll die. And Jesus had to say, get thee what? Behind me, Satan. Because you're not thinking about the things of God, you're only thinking about the things of men. And that's how men think. Men thinking, well, I'm not going to allow that to happen. That was his view, his vision, his view of what should happen to the Messiah. He believed Jesus is the Messiah. And so he was going to protect the Messiah, the Messiah with all he had with his life. But it turned out that he didn't.
But that was a false doctrine, because Jesus had to die.
He had to die
for us to live again.
Exactly.
So for him to say that he would protect Jesus, he was then denying what Jesus came.
He was using a very plausible and what sounds good theology that came straight. What did Jesus say? Get thee behind me, who? Satan. So where did that come from? It came from Satan. Satan knows how to cozy up and make you feel like, oh, this makes sense. See, a lot of Satan stuff, it makes sense if you sit and try to add it up. It calculates. It comes to 2 plus 2. Mm-hmm. But and then the thing about God is a lot of his stuff don't add up. It looks a little off mathematically. But we can't live in the logic. We have to live in the faith, because ultimately, like Penny said, for the moment, ultimately, God's stuff always adds up. And Satan's stuff is always incorrect. He's going to get an F. Every question's wrong, no matter how good it starts.
Amen.
So we got to always keep that in mind, that Satan is a liar.
He is.
And he lied. Now, the thing about it is, and we're closing with this. Remember, we're stopping at 17. We'll pick up on that next week. The thing about it is, you have to choose which one you're going to believe.
That's right.
All right? If you're going to believe God, that means you got to believe God for all that he does. Well, God tells me some stuff that don't make sense. But are you going to believe him? See, Satan can tell you these things. This makes sense. I make this. Yes. This seems like, a nice path, but it ain't the path that God called you to go, and ultimately, it's not going to work. See, Peter was like, it don't really make sense. Well, couldn't we just keep the Messiah alive? Well, no. If you kept him alive, he couldn't do something mysterious, which Peter couldn't calculate. And that mysterious thing that God was going to do was he's going to pay for the sins of everybody by him dying. And then we got that revelation now. But how many other revelations that God has and different things that he is doing that we don't get yet? And that he's trying to cleanse us of. All right? And so when we get further on, there's going to be a lot of, like I said, 613 rules of what to do and what not to do. And a lot of it's going to have to do with hygiene. We're looking at this point now where we're in this world where everybody's trying to, identify how to keep germs from spreading. Coronavirus, we're trying to wear the mask and everything. Well, we're going to see that here when he starts giving out all these do's and don't do's. A whole lot of it has to do with social distancing. You got to social distance after you do certain activities. And God did it because he knew about germs and viruses and bacteria back then, which is no big deal. God knows everything. But we as human beings didn't understand and know it at that time. But he was having Israel social distance way back so that they wouldn't infect themselves like how the heathen nations were doing it, which we're going to see. And then he's going to go to some heathen nations and he says, when you go in there, don't touch none of that stuff. Don't go in there. Don't even take nothing. Don't touch. Burn everything. because they got issues. All right? And so when you look at it and go, why? And one of the guys aching, he's going to be like, oh, man, that's a nice robe over there. I'm not burning that robe. I'm going to take the robe with me. And so he goes in and grabs the contaminated robe, and there's another big issue. So the trust in God aspect is so important to recognize and to see. And oftentimes we don't do it because instead of walking by faith, the scripture says we should walk by faith, not by what? Sight. We do just the opposite. We turn our minds. I'm going to walk by sight. I'm going to walk on what I think I can see. I'm going. If I see things that seem right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see what happens. Well, that's not what God told us to do. We're to walk by faith, not by sight. All right, I have to stop because I'm past my time, and we're not going to finish this. I'm sorry, Wayne. Please don't beat me up.